Welcome to Season 2 of It Takes a Family, a podcast that helps take parenting from desperation to hope. I'm one of your hosts, Andy.
Hey, Andy.
Hi, Kelly.
I am your co-host, Kelly. This season, we've been diving deep into the research surrounding Gen Z's medical health, looking at how we move from thin digital connections to the thick community that we and our kids so desperately need.
This week, we have a very special bonus episode featuring a guest who is world-renowned expert on exactly how our brains are wired for that connection. We are talking about Dr. Curt Thompson.
Yes, we are. Welcome, Dr. Thompson.
Thank you, Kelly and Andy. It's a pleasure to be here. I mean, okay, can I just say, my giggling demonstrates the pleasure that I have. And I'm not even kidding. It's already in our time leading up to this formal recording time. Just the laughter that we've had in the last 20 minutes has just really been warm and vulnerable. And it's just a real delight to be here.
Well, we love you're here. So a little bit about Dr. Thompson, for those of you who are not familiar with his work. He is a psychiatrist, a speaker, and the author of several incredible books, including The Soul of Shame, The Anatomy of the Soul, and The Soul of Desire. He's also the founder of Being Known, LLC. It's an awesome podcast everybody should check out. Mm-hmm. And his work sits at the beautiful intersection of interpersonal neurobiology and Christian spiritual formation.
Excellent. He spent his career helping people understand that our deepest healing happens when we are truly seen, soothed, and known by others. Dr. Thompson, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks so much. It's a pleasure.
I want to start by saying this, and then I'm going to ask you questions. There are a handful of people. I'm gonna compliment you, and you're going to feel slightly uncomfortable because I've found that to be true so far in our interactions. But there are a handful of people that when I've seen them speak, that it's like they unlock something that I knew was true, but I couldn't have put words to it. And so there's like this resonance in my spirit of like, oh, what he is saying, and some people that I read, so what he is saying is like, I am experiencing at the deepest part of me, and I really appreciate that. And then there's like, oh, and he's funny. That's helpful. And so I have appreciated the times at the Christian Alliance for Orphans national conference that I've been to and heard you speak. I've appreciated that in the sense that like, oh, he's speaking to a part of me that I really appreciate, and I think other people do too. I think that's why they buy your books and listen to your podcast, because you've unlocked something really special for people.
Yeah, well, that's very kind to say. Well, say more of that.
We're gonna move on. Okay.
So now I'm disappointed. I thought there was more where that came from, but apparently not. Okay.
Unfortunately, from here it gets pretty disappointing. So the way that we start with all of our guests is we frame them within the family of their own. And so we'd love to hear a little bit about the family you grew up in and the family you lead now.
Yeah. So I was the fourth of four sons, and my parents were in their mid-40s when I was born. I had a brother who was 18, 16, and 11 years of age, so three much older brothers. Okay. And I grew up in a small town in eastern Ohio, in a town of about 800 people, in a small evangelical Quaker community, if you can get your head around those two words together, evangelical Quaker community. And, I was born in 1962, and if you're pregnant and you're in your mid-40s in 1962, you're anxious. And I have this small black and white photograph of my parents the night before I was born, and they look like they just lost a child. I mean, these are not people who are anticipating with great mirth what's coming the next day, as it turns out. And I say all that, to say my oldest brother, my 18-year-old, my brother who was 18 at the time, he went off to college, and I was born the following week. So he comes home at Thanksgiving. And it's like, what's this?
Right.
Because that's. He knew, but there wasn't a lot of connection in that regard. And so by the time I was 5, my brothers were all out of the house. Wow. And so even though I grew up technically as the fourth of 4 sons, I was reared as an only kid by parents who raised sons in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. which were very, very different decades.
Mhm.
And, there are a couple things I would say. I grew up in a God-fearing home with two parents who were really serious about faith in their own particular way. And anything good about my life, I will lay at the feet of my parents. There's just so much richness. I had no question about my parents' fundamental love for me.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
At the same time, my father was someone who, I don't know if this is only just true for the state of Ohio, where they would send parents home from the hospital with one disciplinary action, and that is, you quit your crying or I'm going to give you something to cry about.
Sure.
This was kind of like that was the standard answer for just about every question that arose.
Okay.
Whether it was, a paper cut or the lawnmower just cut your finger off.
Right.
It's kind of that way. And so at the same time that I knew my father loved me, it was true that we didn't have a single substantive conversation before he died when I was 17. My mom, who, again, had a significant conversion experience just a few years before I was born, when she found out that she was pregnant, was anxious enough about this that, as I was told later, the prayer was, God, if you will make sure that he's normal, I'll give him to you. Now, suddenly, I'm thrust into the role of Samuel, not even knowing that this is about to happen to me. But there is then this sense that I think that she had her own story of trauma that was, in some respects, I think, pretty unresolved.
Yeah.
Which meant she would worry that I was not. I would want to make sure that I was being who I was supposed to be.
Right.
I remember when I was 10 years of age now in our community, this small Quaker community, where I was in church 3 times a week, Sunday morning, Sunday evening, Wednesday evening prayer meeting, where there were 15 people and everybody was 40 years of age or older except one person, and that was me. And one summer when I was 10, the fact that I even remember my age and where I was when this happened one summer, it was a Wednesday evening, and my father went most Wednesday evenings with my mom. We could walk to our church.
Okay.
And we go to the prayer meeting, and but he didn't always go. And on this particular night, my mom comes out of the front door. I'm with my friends in the front yard playing football. And she asks me in front of my friends, Curt, are you coming with me to prayer meeting tonight? And I said, I made the mistake of asking, well, do I have to? Mm-hmm. And she said, where do you think Jesus would want you to be? Now, if I had been nimble enough on my feet,
Right.
I might have said, at 10, I might have said, I think Jesus wants me playing football with my friends.
Right.
If I had been nimble and foolish, I might have said, I'm not sure, why don't you go ask your husband, who apparently isn't going to church tonight either. That would not have been wise. Instead,
because he had one disciplinary action.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, that was not going to go well.
No,
I could see my future.
Yes.
There was only one future. But I say all this again, we hear, and life was filled with a series of these kinds of moments.
Right.
There were not child abuse. They were not being harsh, and at the same time, they kind of set me up in ways that they couldn't know to have my own long-standing existential crisis with faith after I came to faith as an early teenager, and so. At the same time that I can say, this is a family that loved me well. Like all families, it's a family that, loved me imperfectly. Mm-hmm. And, this is when we get to Mark chapter 3, we see that this is where Jesus upends family, where he looks around because the message has been sent. Your mother and your brothers are looking for you. They're outside. They can't get to you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And here you have a firstborn Jewish male saying from the center of the crowd, who is my mother? If you're married, if you're his brothers, can you imagine the incredulity?
Right.
The one who does the will of my Father, she is my mother, he is my brother, she is my sister. This whole notion that in many respects, every single one of us come into families that we eventually will have to leave in order to join the family of faith. And what's tricky about that, of course, is that we join a family of faith that itself is woefully imperfect.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, look, if I got to leave, like, why am I jumping from the, from the fire to the frying pan?
Right,
like,
right.
At
least you know what the fire feels like.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right. But there is this sense in which Jesus is saying, if you want to be part of me, that automatically means you're going to have to be part of other people.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really striking to me is like this is what interpersonal neurobiology would tell us.
Right.
Not necessarily that it tells us about faith, because science doesn't speak to faith, but science talks about mechanics that are certainly plainly consistent with this notion that we're born into families that, even though they're imperfect, are the model for what God is planning for us when the new heaven and earth arrives, which is both really good news because we long to be connected to families. And at the same time, he's also there to say, yeah, and that also includes your friend George, who you think shouldn't even make it into the kingdom of God.
Right.
Like he's going to get here and you're going to wonder like, George, how'd you get in? Right. And like, well, because Jesus has plans for me and George, and we've got eternity to work it out.
Right.
Which is kind of a bummer because that's a long time to have to be with George.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
All right. So what about your family today? Talk to us. You told us a little bit off camera about you and your lovely wife.
Yeah.
Share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been married for 39 and a half years to Phyllis, and who, as I said earlier, I don't deserve my life in general, and she would be like number one on the list of reasons you don't deserve your life.
Right.
And she would agree.
Yeah.
As we said.
We called her.
Yeah,
She told us.
Oh goodness. Right. And I would say my two children, Rachel, who's 35, and she's married to Noah, and they're the parents of our first grandchild, Simon, and our son Nathan, who's 32. They are also our two children are also really significant parts of how God has formed me in the last 35 years since we've had children, and I, as we say, marriage and childbearing, like it's a crapshoot. Like, I mean, I don't mean to be so like blunt about this and scientific, right? But like you can even approach any of these things with wisdom and a posture of humility. You're doing the best that you can, and you still can't predict for all the outcomes. I mean, hard things can just happen.
Right.
That makes it difficult. And, not just because you end up getting married to me, which is difficult in itself, but the notion of like, you just don't know how things are going to go. And so all I know is that I'm extraordinarily grateful to be married to the woman I'm married to and my two kids, who are all three, and my daughter's husband, all three deeply committed followers of Jesus, and continue to. My daughter's a pastor in a church and continues to when I listen to her preach. It's hard not to wonder, how did I get here?
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
I think it's interesting. I know I was watching some different things on YouTube last couple of weeks, just getting ready for your visit, and with this idea of you can't give away what you don't have. And I think one of the reasons that you resonate so much with people is how much you are loved by the Lord, by His goodness to you. And I see you being very, very aware of His goodness to you. And I think when you have that, it kind of oozes out of you, So just thank you for sharing so vulnerably about all that. So for sure.
Well, it's just the thing, right? The king, man.
Yeah.
You don't have words.
Yeah.
So we're gonna talk hopefully at the end of our time is sort of about how we get more formed or the way that God forms us in that. I want us to kind of start though, in some ways maybe with our brokenness, but in particular this season that we've talked about in season 2, we've talked a lot about sort of the pressure that parents are feeling. In this day and age, particularly the isolation that they're feeling, the percentage of parents that sort of hold to major depression. Stephanie
anxiety,
shared a
yes.
stat that 65% of parents, I'm making it up, but feel totally overwhelmed all the time. I mean, it was like
And alone.
an unbelievable. So I think parents today, and by proxy their children, carry a lot of pressure. Do you agree, and why?
Well, when you read the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus spends as many, if not more words, depending on the translation that you read, as many, if not more words on the topic of anxiety than any other topic
He
in the
does.
Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah.
And humans have been anxious forever. And in many respects, our being anxious, I use that word and it sounds relatively benign to other words that we can use in
Right.
terms of major depression, in terms of psychosis and trauma and PTSD and so forth and so on. But the common thread of all these things is that we are anxious. Just have different levels of severity of all this. And parents have been anxious forever. And so is it possible, is it true that our current generation of parents and or children of parents have, relatively speaking, a greater degree of anxiety? That's possible. The data might link this to a number of different things. The thing is, in some respects, we might say, well, it's kind of like looking at primary colors. You can look at the primary color red, and that color has lots of different hues to it. But still, you have the primary color, which is red. You might be talking maroon, you might be talking pink. You're really talking about different levels of intensity of the same thing. And so even where parents feel overwhelmed, perhaps in times and ways now that they didn't 30 years ago, our response to it fundamentally is still really ultimately going to be no different. Which has to do with the question of, am I willing, any of us, am I as a parent, am I willing to pause long enough to be curious about the state of affairs in which I find myself? Am I willing to allow myself to be seen by someone else long enough? And by seen, I don't mean even necessarily, I'm not even just talking about seen by a therapist. I mean seen by another human being,
Right.
vulnerably and truly, such that my story is no longer born solely by myself. The notion that this haunting line in the second chapter of Genesis, that it's not good for the man to be alone, and God's speaking to an incompletion in the story. He's saying like, oh, there's something that still needs to happen here.
Yeah.
But it's a double entendre, right, for the Hebrew writers, right? This is not just about, what God is observing about the current status of the creational order. This is also a harbinger of what's coming.
Yeah.
Because he creates something out of the human in which the one become two in order to become one flesh again at the end of Genesis chapter 2. And then you find, by the time you get to Genesis chapter 3 and Genesis chapter 4, it's now not just moving apart from each other, so much so that we're killing one another.
Right.
And in many respects, that's what we do when we're anxious. We commit violence, first toward ourselves and then toward others. And so one of the things that our parents who are overwhelmed right now probably are not that aware of, they might say, oh, I'm overwhelmed because, and they start to list all the things that are outside their skin.
Right.
That are piling on. It's my kids, it's my job, it's my this, it's da. And we wouldn't say that's untrue. But what we would say first and foremost is that the thing that they are most troubled by but are not aware of is the way they are imagining themselves to be in the world. I have problems, but I am my biggest problem.
Right.
I'm not my only problem. There are other things that are problematic for me, but they become problematic primarily because of the story that I tell myself.
Right.
And so parents might hear our podcast and think, oh my gosh, this is great. We're going to hear a shrink talk and he's going to give us like the 4 tips to like resolve all of my problems in my life. And I just do the 1, 2, 3, 4, these things that are outside my skin. And I would say the way that we want to respond to who we are isn't actually that complicated, and it is excruciatingly difficult.
Mm.
Life isn't difficult because it's complicated.
Right.
But it is really hard for us to do some of the simplest things because they require repeated action over and over and over and over and over again, like becoming a really great musician, becoming a really great writer, becoming a really great student. We're going to do things over and over again. The question is, to what degree am I willing to allow someone else to join me in that process?
So in some ways, thank you for saying that. In some ways, I hear you kind of talking around shame. You're like do I call you an expert in shame?
He's a sultan of shame.
Sultan of shame.
That's what
Okay, okay.
Have you heard
My
that
friend
before?
Andy Gullahorn said I was the master of shame once, which
Okay.
that was but the Sultan of shame. Kelly.
Yeah.
The Sultan of Shame is really good. Really,
The
really
Sultan
good.
of Shame is in the house. I don't know if that's a good thing or not.
Maybe we say you've written extensively on
Yes.
shame.
Okay,
Okay.
we can accept that.
So is shame, like, how are shame and anxiety linked? As you're talking about this, I feel like he's talking somewhat around shame. How are those two things linked together? Is that a fair question?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I think that they are they're very closely related. They're related in their activity. They're related in meaning that when we encounter shame, anxiety is going to start to entangle itself in it. It's going to be part of that
Right.
experience. But we would say that they are somewhat different neurophysiologic events. In that, when we have the experience of shame, there are particular neural networks that get activated for that. And those networks can go online and be activated as early as 15 to 18 months of age in a child's life.
Wow.
So long before a child has language, long before a child has, before their prefrontal cortex is aware of what's going on in the world fully, they can start to demonstrate the neurophysiological response of shame. We often would think, well, gosh, I would think that I would only be ashamed of things that I knew that were happening to me. I'd have to have a prefrontal cortex that would be advanced enough to be
Right.
aware that that's happening. But the fact that it happens as early as it does gives us some insight into the fact that it is first and foremost something that we sense. And I don't need to think in order to sense.
Right.
As we like to say in the brain, first we sense and then we make sense of what we sense, even if that's happening at light speed. That's happening at the brain speed of like the electrical conductivity of the neurons. And so shame is this felt sense that we describe as a turning away. I have this distress that shows up in my face, my chest, my hands. There is this, it's hard for us to find words to do this, but like Kelly, like that look on your face right now, right? Like there is a sense in which we say the word, and we can even sense shame in ways that we find a hard time using words to describe it. People say, well, Curt, how do you define shame? I say, I don't have a definition for it. All we can do is describe what our response is and what we do when we know that we're experiencing it. And there are some of these telltale signs of, first of all, it happens automatically. I get red in the face. I want to turn my gaze away from you because I have a hard time tolerating your looking at me when I'm in this place.
Right.
I literally physically will turn my shoulders inward and turn away from you. We see this in animals at times with dogs. We don't really know what happens in cats because we're not really sure they're animals.
Right.
So, but these kinds of things happen quite neurophysiologically, and then eventually, as we become old enough to where we're trying to make sense of what we sense, then it starts to work its way into our cognition. So an example would be, the 10-year-old boy who has done well enough but not that great at math finally gets his 92%.
Right.
He takes his paper to his dad, who he could not wait to check. And dad says, this is great. Where's the other 8%? Now, dad is not trying to hurt his son's feeling. Dad is trying to push him. He's trying to encourage. If dad knew what was happening, dad probably, he's a good guy, he would not do that. But he wants to.
Right.
Yeah. Dad's not a bad guy, but dad's not paying attention. And if you grow up in that house and that's what you're hearing,
Mm.
every time you do something that brings you joy, like, well, what more can we do?
Mm-hmm.
What's likely going to happen is that when that 10-year-old is 18 and he is a 5-star athlete and he is a straight A student, he will still be looking for the 8%.
Right.
But the thought that will be in his head will be, and he won't say this to anybody, will be like, no, Dad, I still got to do better for Dad. Like there's this felt sense like I'm not doing well enough for Dad. I'm not good enough as a son. Now, of course, if his father were to hear this, his father might be incredulous. Like, what are you talking about? He said, because I'm still looking for the 8%.
Right.
And Dad, like, what do you, again, doesn't know. And so this, again, is part of why evil can wield shame. I think it's important to say here, too, shame in and of itself is not a bad thing.
Right.
It is simply a signal. It's a neurobiological signal that there is something in the matrix here that is not okay. And the reality is there are behaviors that we as humans commit for which shame is absolutely the proper response.
Right.
We probably don't have nearly enough of it in our culture
Right.
around certain behaviors. The problem for us is not that it happens. It's not that my brain experiences this. The problem is what I do in response to it. And what we see in Genesis chapter 3 is that the response that the humans gave is to hide and turn away when God comes walking.
Right. Right.
God's coming for them.
Right.
Because this is a signal that tends to have me turning away. I actually need you to come find me. So no wonder in the biblical texts, so often when sin is described, far more frequently it pairs it with shame than it does even with guilt. Guilt being a thing that we sense and feel and so forth, relatively speaking, much later developmentally, not until you're somewhere between the ages of probably like 3, maybe 4 to 5 years of age.
Okay.
So in a kid's lifetime, that's like forever before it starts to develop. But also a signal of how cognitively, eventually what starts to happen as a kid, as I begin to like make sense of what I'm sensing, I will start to tell myself stories. I'm not good enough. I'm not that enough. I'm like very self-contemptuous cognition.
Right.
The ultimate terror of this, though, is this sense that there's something wrong with me, right? Guilt is I did something bad. Shame is I am bad. And at some point, Andy, you're going to see the thing and you're going to go. It's not good for the man or the woman to be alone. And you're going to see the part of me that I hate the most, and you're going to go.
You're going to run.
Anxiety, I would invite our listeners to consider, anxiety is primarily my anticipated future in which I am going to be left completely alone with only those parts of me that I hate the most and from which there is no escape. And some might say, oh, this is what hell looks like.
Yeah.
And I can't get away from it. The thing about the God who has made us that is tricky is, as you read in the text, is that the first couple were naive and underdeveloped, right? He did not make them full-grown adults, right? They're not fully mature. And he did not warn them. He did not say, hey, by the way, on Thursday, like Mr. Pit Viper is coming to visit. And when he does, these are the things you need to know. Here's the questions he's going to ask.
Right.
He's not like a physician who gives you like, oh, here are the side effects of the medication.
Right.
There's a sense in which he was very straightforward and simple. You have all of this for you to do, and there's this one thing you may not do. It's very simple. We also know that he gave that to the human, to the male before Eve was on the scene. And so we don't know what he communicated well or didn't.
Right.
But we do know that
we can guess he didn't communicate.
Right. I mean,
well,
he's a dude. Right.
I didn't say that.
No,
like,
I know. I know. Like you don't know. No, like I own it. But there is this sense in which they are underdeveloped enough because God wants them to own every step of their maturational process. He doesn't want to just turn them into adults all by himself. He wants them to be fully part of every single moment on purpose, wide awake of the growth that he's inviting them into. And so that means that when it comes to our own healing, when you come to find me in my shame, what I would wish would be, you find me in that place at my current age, and we'll just like snap our fingers and all that shame will go away. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, we read Jesus talking to Nicodemus, and he says, y'all got to be born again. Like, why can't I just start, turn over a new leaf and start from where I am?
Right.
And then he says, look, unless you change and become like little children, heaven's not going to work for you.
Right.
Now, there are lots of different ways that we can understand what he means by that, right? You're going to be childlike, you're going to be receptive to faith and so forth. But there are lots of things that this implies. One being, children who are growing up in securely attached homes are ones who, when they are in trouble, they go to their parents. And Jesus knows that there are things that happened to us where we have unrepaired ruptures from the time we were 15 to 18 months of age.
Right.
And to live in heaven means we are going to have each of those moments healed. And I'm like, crap.
It's like a really long time.
Right, it is, and which is good because like we have eternity.
Right.
This is why are you so confident?
One of the things I'm thinking about, going back to your story of the 10-year-old, the 8%, you painted him as a 5-star athlete who made straight A's. Let's say he doesn't get that from his dad. He never gets the "I'm really proud of you," and he lives in that shame and anxiety. He goes on, he has a nice little college career, gets a good job as a data analyst, and he starts to work up the ladder of corporate America. He's making good money, he meets a woman. They have a child, okay? In what ways, like, does he pass on that shame? Like, how does that bear out in his parenting? What does that do for now the generational impact of he's still seeking the 8%?
Right.
And now he's got a little guy looking at him who's also going to bring him a math test one day.
Right. Well, those we say that we name things to tame things, and the things that we don't name will eventually come back to haunt us. It reminds me of a patient I took care of. I write about this in Anatomy of Soul right here. So he's a pediatric cardiothoracic surgeon. I mean, anybody who's got that many syllables in their title, they got to be smart.
Right.
And he comes to me because his wife has sent him to me. She's kind of like not happy. And the story that he tells is that they have a 2-year-old and he wants to have more children, and she's not having it because she said, like, we got stuff going on here, and until you get your stuff taken care of. Now, this is a guy who you would think, like, he's that 10-year-old. He's this 5-star athlete. He's got it all put together. But as it turns out, he said, yeah, she wants me to come because I think I've been a little rough on our 2-year-old. Now, 2-year-old was a little advanced for you. 2-year-old, they're walking, talking a little early and so forth. And so there is this sense in which the surgeon talks to his 2-year-old and thinks that he's talking to a 22-year-old.
Right.
Because they can understand 4 or 5 words.
Right.
And she's not, his wife's not really happy about the way he is being with the child.
Sure.
And, at first glance, he thinks that the only reason he's in the office is because his wife has sent him, like, as is not uncommon for men.
Right.
So they've been sent by their wives
Right.
who are practicing being their mothers. And yeah, because the 42-year-olds that they're sending are really like 14, right? This is the person who shows up. I'm doing adolescent psychiatry with a surgeon.
Right. Thankfully, I'm 41, so
that
doesn't resonate
Well, so you have a year.
Right.
You have a year. And so we discover some things about this guy, and you ask him the question about his life, and he's like, everything's fine about his life.
Yeah. Right.
And then, and then this will tell you something about like what shame does as it meets us in our bodies in ways that we wouldn't necessarily predict. And so we have this thing that we do. We call it a body scan. It's just someone, right? And our listeners may be aware of this. You just ask someone to like find a relaxed posture. You close your eyes, a couple of deep breaths, and then we start to walk people through just paying attention to their body. We start with their feet, and we work their way through their lower limbs and their torso and the whole 9 yards. And we get to his abdominal area, and he starts to like his face is starting to grimace, and he's starting to express some discomfort. I don't expect this. I didn't expect to see this coming. And he said, I'm having a memory. And he says, I haven't thought about it in years. Now, mind you, we'd already gone through all the standard kind of questions that we ask in a psychiatric evaluation about your past and trauma and so forth and so on. Nothing. I have no memory of anything. How many siblings do you have? I have two brothers. And so, okay, fine. And he begins to tell the story of the memory in which he remembers being 10 years of age. He's standing on the sidewalk. He's standing in his driveway while his mother and his 2-year-old brother are standing on the sidewalk just before his brother bolts into the street and is hit by a car and killed. And he hasn't thought about this in 20 years.
Wow.
You ask him, how many siblings do you have? I have 2 siblings. He had 3, but he doesn't name these. And he reports that he jogs his memory that he went on to have some challenges with he had stomach trouble. And they sent him to a doctor for a while, but then he stopped having to pay attention to that, eventually got over it. Now, it's not surprising that his trouble is reemerging as his son is 2 years of age. And the implicit memory of the distress, the anxiety, this felt sense that he is trapped with feelings that are untenable, but he has no place to go with them.
Mm-hmm.
And anxiety causes us to do all kinds of strange things as human beings. And one of those things we will do is that we will become a literally world-renowned pediatric cardiothoracic surgeon. And in part, not only, but in part as a way to keep that distress buried at the center of the earth, because there was just way too much grief for one 10-year-old to tolerate. And so our parents come into these places. That 10-year-old with the 92% grows up to be somebody who's working really, really hard. But it's not just the 92%. It's not just one incident. It will be multiple incidents in which there will be some slight that he will feel, some shame that he'll experience. And so, as we like to say, shame becomes the death of 1,000 cuts. Most of the shame that we experience as human beings is not some horrific traumatic event. It's the private stuff that we do to ourselves in our own minds when we are telling ourselves all kinds of things over and over and over. And it's so automatic, we don't even know that we're doing it, like pressing on the gas or the accelerator while we're driving a car. And what that then means is that I'm having to burn a lot of energy, literally, neurobiologic energy that you got to burn glucose for, right? Your brain, pound for pound, burns extraordinarily more energy than any other organ in your body. More so than your heart does. More so than your liver does, the largest organ in your body. We're going to burn a ton of energy to contain that until my body says, no more. And the way your body says no more, when it comes to our surgeon, he starts barking at his 2-year-old. He can't contain this anymore. His wife, who kind of knows about this story, but not much about it, neither she nor anyone else is guessing, oh, I'm married to a guy whose 10-year-old self is being asked to do an adult's job with a 2-year-old boy. And he can't do it. And it's not because he's stupid. It's not because he's not working hard enough. It's not because he's a coward. It's because he has a part of him that is disabled from doing it. But it is in the paying attention to what's happening. Like his wife says, like, you got to do something about this. And so he came to see me instead of like just drinking another scotch. Right? He's doing something about this. And at some point when we say, oh, what will that 10-year-old who brought his 92% do? He will pass that on to his child in some way, shape, or form, in the same way that the surgeon was passing on these things to his own kid with his irritability. And the beautiful thing about all this, about what neuroscience is telling us, and this, like, Jesus is talking to Nicodemus, right? Jesus isn't talking to a 12-year-old. Like, if I'm 12 and he says, start over, I'm like, okay, I only have to go back 12 years,
Right.
right? If I'm Nicodemus, I'm like, oh, I'm so stuck. Like, I just can't do this because
Right.
I'm 55 years old.
Right.
And if it were me, like, that'd make me ancient, right?
Right. Yeah.
And this is the hopefulness about this. Jesus is supremely confident that it is never too late. It is never too late to retell your story, to allow your story to intersect with the storyteller. And this is the thing about being like Jesus followers, is that we are the gospel. We are the embodied presence of Jesus in the world that interacts with other people who are desperately, without knowing it, wanting to live into and tell a different story. And our mission is to look at them bright-eyed and say, we know how to tell this story. And we want to help you learn how to do that. We're not going to twist your arm. We're not going to hold a gun to your head. We will not do this with violence, because we remember a God who hovers at creation in the middle of all the chaos. That God does not come in and commit violence as a way to create. That God comes in and hovers. And this is what we do. And this is hard for us to do. If I'm a parent, oh my gosh, how many times can I say this? How many times we wanted to actually kill our children?
You can say it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not going to answer it. but you
Okay.
can say
Right.
it.
Okay. Like, we want to commit violence because I like this is who I am. And to imagine that God comes and he hovers. And there are plenty of us who I'm sure who are listening to this podcast who, when we imagine our children, we don't just hover, but we also grieve because we feel powerless. We feel overwhelmed. We feel all the things. We are Jesus weeping over Jerusalem. There is grief for us. And this is why, even as parents, yes, more information can be helpful, but even more so is what I need as a parent is someone else to come alongside me to help me tell my story differently. Our 10-year-old with the 92%, what I want for him as an adult when he's beginning to parent, I want someone to come for him in ways that his dad did not.
Right.
In order for him to be so deeply known that he's no longer anxious, even if he doesn't have all the information about how to parent his child.
Right.
That he does know that the single most important thing that his child needs is his non-anxious presence.
Yes.
So
Connection.
I'd love to spend the last bit of our time sort of talking about that. But we could use the term repair. We could use the term formation. They're probably separate in some ways, but sort of that work of connection with another person, connection with the God of the universe that ultimately begins to form, begins to create new, I'm not an interpersonal neurobiologist, but neural pathways. And did I do good
You
there?
just said those words just like an interpersonal neurobiologist.
I felt
Don't
really
very-
good.
I'm very
Don't
proud of you.
Yeah, don't encourage.
Dr. Nelson,
Sorry.
Dr. Nelson would say, no, but I'd love to just kind of sort of let's move it a little bit from, okay, if we're using the same kid, what is it that begins to sort of tip that? What's the repair look like in his life? What does it look like to be spiritually formed, such that he begins to experience freedom and begins to parent in a new and unique way in his family?
Yeah. You know, one of the things that we talk about is, which is surprising for folks sometimes, is that the development of secure attachment requires the experience of repaired ruptures.
Okay.
We sometimes like to think that to be securely attached, like I need to like not have, like bad things just shouldn't happen. And nothing could be further from the truth, right? When you look at the biblical narrative, right, when is the first wound committed? Genesis 2, right? When God opens up the side of Adam, right? Like no consent form was signed as far as I know.
Right,
He didn't,
right.
he didn't consult Adam and say, what do you think of this?
Right.
And he's like, gaping chest wound? Let's go. Right. No, he doesn't. There is this sense in which a wound is committed, but the outcome, the purpose is beauty and goodness. Because when Eve is brought, Adam's response is poetry and song. We as parents do this all the time. We set limits for kids that don't like, we are wounding our children.
Right.
How dare we?
Mm.
By setting limits of all kinds in order to create beauty and goodness on the other side of the limits that we set. And those experience, and there will also be times when we do things when, as we say, the only way that you don't screw up your kids is don't have them. Right? It's the only way. And so we given that.
Too late.
Right, exactly. Right. You're in the world.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Right.
bummer.
The point is that kids don't need parents that are perfect. Kids need parents who recognize and repair ruptures when they see them. And I mean, I have vivid memories of those moments when I have had when I have committed ruptures with my kids. That on a couple of occasions that I just thought, I hope we can repair this, because I was so deeply aware of how badly I had hurt them, and because in those moments I hurt them. Out of my own unfinished business. It's tough. It's my own story that I have not, right? I've not taken care of. And the good news about this is that it's not just a matter of repairing ruptures. It's a matter of becoming increasingly comfortable and confident, knowing that ruptures are part of what it means to live. And what I am committed to is to becoming ever more effective at the repair work. This is what it means for me to grow. We sometimes think, growth for me will be I'll know that I've grown, I'm mature when I no longer have any ruptures with my kids, with my wife, with my friends, with any of this. And that'll be when you're dead, right? That's when we'll know that. The real question of maturity is, to what degree am I aware that when it happens, I am quick to make the maneuver to repair that rupture. And what we're doing with a child when we do that, when ruptures occur, at the center of them are ruptures that are significant that don't lead to growth. Shame is at the core of how they operate.
Right.
And part of that shame necessarily has that child, whether that child is 8 or that child is 28,
Right.
has some part of that child's experience in isolation. I am alone with myself, just like the 10-year-old was alone with himself within his 92%.
Right.
If I, as the parent, move, now this takes courage on my part, because who likes to wake up and realize that I have really hurt my kid? We say
I can tell you this, I feel the deepest shame in those moments.
it's the worst.
It's the worst. And then when my wife and I talk, who am
Who
I?
possessed me?
Right. What just happened to me?
Totally.
I am a terrible human.
Yeah.
And how did I speak to a 6-year-old like that? I just have these moments that I feel the deepest shame in those moments.
Right.
And that's the hardest to step towards repair in
Right.
that.
Right. Which is why it's so important for us as parents to have companions along the way.
Right.
So that I have other parents, these 3 guys that I've been meeting with for 25 years every Tuesday
What a
morning.
gift.
Yeah.
Where it's confession. I mean, we're telling our stories more truly. And there are just days when we meet on Tuesdays, and sometimes something happens if it happens between me and one of my kids or me and my wife, on Wednesday, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's 6 days to Tuesday. I'm so much more grateful when it happens on Monday.
Right.
When the rupture happens on Monday, I don't have to wait as long.
Right.
But it's not just a matter of telling your story. It's a matter of developing over time a thick fabric of confidence that knowing, in the background, I can live more comfortably and confidently in my skin because I'm also aware that should something happen, this thing is in place. And where I am able to do that, my mind is already not alone, which enables me to circle back, to come to my wife, to come to my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so we say, we sometimes we say to people, you man and wife, you kiss the bride, you're married, good luck, right? We send them up until you need marriage therapy, right? There's this sense in which you're on your own.
Yeah.
No couple should be left on their own.
No,
It's not in this world. We want to make sure that we have companions along the way whereby I am so deeply known as a male, as a husband, that I can do that work as I do in my Tuesday morning group that enables me to go back to my marriage and do that work well. And so for our parents, my longing is for you to be deeply known enough so that you're practicing naming your shame where it exists preemptively, so that when it does show up unexpectedly, you have had the opportunity to practice not being alone in order for you then to take the initiative steps to repair the rupture. And when you do, you are teaching your child from very early on. And you are first teaching this not cognitively. You are first teaching this to them in their very bodies. When I say something that ruptures my relationship with my 4-year-old or my 8-year-old, and I go back and say, Nathan, the reason you're feeling really awful is because of what I did. You're not feeling bad because of what you did. You didn't do anything. It's me. That's why. And so you're helping him learn that the thing that he feels is something for which he is not primarily responsible.
Right.
But we're going to work on that right then and there. But if I'm paying attention, the next day, I'm going to come back to him and say, hey, I just want to check in. That thing that we talked about yesterday, I just want to know how we're doing. You know, when we know that our kids are cognitively and verbally able to have those kinds of conversations, we're going to come back and revisit that, because just because I have one conversation with him immediately after the fact does not mean that shame is not going to come back and try to haunt him.
Right.
And so we will need continual conversation over and over in order to repair that. And this is one of the things that's hard for us because we'd like to have instant healing. We look at the biblical arc and we think God's taken a long time, and he's not worried about how long it's taken.
Right.
We're just on the journey.
Yeah.
Well, and I think too, even beyond Eagle Ranch and its ministry for the last 40 years and starting this podcast, all of it is around this idea of community and doing life together, and we don't need to do life in a vacuum. So, I mean, it just echoes and echoes and echoes.
It's incredibly helpful, and I'm over here having a little bit of a moment. I had this beautiful experience the other day. I had a very poor experience and a very beautiful experience in which a friend just showed up randomly in the space that I was at here at the ranch, and I didn't even know I needed it until he walked in. And I, like, that morning, I had a very not good. My go-to is a loud voice. I've got a great voice.
We weren't aware of that, Andy.
And so I had used a very loud voice with one of my children in a way that I was not happy about. And I got to see him, and he's like, "How you doing?" And I was like, "Man, I am not good today." Right? Like. I needed him to walk through the door because I got to say it was a bad day, and he got to go, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Like, are you okay?" And it was like the Lord just like in His providence set that up that He would come and see me in that moment. He doesn't live here. That there wasn't a reason even really for it to happen, and then it did.
Okay, can I just say this?
You can.
Your kids have no idea who they have in you as their dad.
Thank you.
No idea. The number of parents for which this wouldn't even cross their mind. Wouldn't even cross their mind. That you are aware that you're aware is like 85% of the work.
And that 15 feels heavy.
And it is. And the 15% isn't even something you consider if the first 85% isn't happening.
You weren't there.
Like if you had more time, I can do this all day.
I know you can, and I can deflect all day too. I'm pretty good. No, I thank you. I really, those are kind words. And I think what you've given us today is such a gift. We're at time, and I wish we weren't. And you've spoken again. I said it at the very beginning. I'll say it again, and then we'll read our outro and we'll be on our way. But you've spoken to the deep parts of who we are, and for that, we're incredibly grateful and thankful.
Well, it's been a pleasure, and I love being in the room where people who know that it's hard to follow Jesus and are going to get after it. And so, thank you for letting me be in the room with you both. It's a real pleasure.
Pleasure was ours.
Yes.
Thanks.
So, on that, thank you to everyone who tuned in for this special, very special bonus conversation. Hearing Dr. Thompson talk about the neurobiology of being known really puts a powerful foundation under the research we've been discussing this season.
Yes, for sure. And it's a reminder that while the data shows a crisis of loneliness, there is a biological and spiritual path towards healing through the thickness of our relationships.
We will be back next week with our regularly scheduled programming.
Yes.
Season 2 format. We continue our series on Change the Story, featuring Dr. Stephanie Shackelford's research.
Yes. And if this bonus episode with Dr. Thompson encouraged you, please leave us a review on Apple or Spotify. It helps us reach more families who need to hear and want to hear this message of hope.
Don't forget to join the conversation on Facebook and Instagram. We'd love to hear your biggest takeaway from our time today.
Yes. And thanks everyone again for listening, and have a great week.